You so much for joining us here this morning. As Joel said before, my name is Lauren and I will be sharing the message with you today. I was standing there reflecting during that song, thinking about we have the cross that changes everything, and this is something that we remember, and it's very easy for us to remember it. It's everywhere. We see it, it's behind me. It's normally over there as well. Often there's one over there. Many of you have one around your neck. The cross is kind of our symbol for this great act of love that saves us, and so it should be. There was a line in that song talking about how some people think that it's just left to history. It's just one of the things that happened and it, stays there. And so this morning, I'm actually talking to you about another thing that is more left in history. But for me, when thinking about the events of Holy Week and Jesus' death on the cross, it's something that leads up to it and gives more significance to that part of the gospel that we read than we often realize. And I think part of that is because it's not ingrained in our church here. It's not part of the faith that we follow, but was very important to the people at the time. I'm talking about the Passover. All of you have heard of the Passover. This ritual started back in Egypt when the Jewish people were enslaved and then freed. That's the beginning of it there. And throughout all of the Old Testament, there is a lot of celebrating the Passover and remembering the Passover. It's one of these things that becomes so ingrained in their culture that they genuinely look forward to celebrating it, and without it, they feel kind of a little bit lost. It's also one of those things where, because it was a ritual and in the temple and before God, they had to be considered ritually clean to partake in this incredible thing. So much so that when they got to the second Passover, and I will explain what all of this means in a minute, a few of them went up to the people in charge and went, "Hey, so we don't count as ritually clean at the moment, but we still, need to be involved in this. What do we do about that?" And so Moses, who they were talking to at the time, went, "You know what, I see you. Leave that with me. I'm going to go talk to God and I'll be back with you with an answer." He comes back to them and he goes, "Okay, so given that you can't participate in this at this time, we're going to have a second opportunity to participate each year for people that could not partake, and that'll be next month." This thing was so important that not only did God himself institute it, but then when people realized they couldn't be involved, they went to Moses, and Moses went, "I'm going to go confer with the big guy upstairs and I'll give you an answer," and he did. So, the Passover is, I think, a word that we hear chucked around a fair bit. It's very easy when we talk about the Lord's Supper. They were celebrating Passover at the time. That's where that came from. It's something that we talk about most weeks at church. It's a word so much used that I think we just glance past it. So I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to explain to you all of the intricacies of this meal because, oh boy, there are many. So get comfortable and try to imagine this movie playing in your head. Or if you've ever seen Prince of Egypt, you have a leg up on everyone else. So, Joseph and his Technicolor coat. It's a great VeggieTales. It's Wild West themed and is the way that I remember this story. But Joseph was one of many sons, beloved by his father, and his brothers did not like this very much. So much so that when he came to visit them in the fields, they all went, "Look at that, our younger brother. We could kill him." And the oldest brother goes, "No, we probably shouldn't do that." Leaves, comes back and goes, "Hey, where is our brother?" He's like, "Oh, he's in the hole. We got him and we put him in the hole." And they sell him into slavery and he goes to Egypt. There's a lot more in that, but that's the short of it. He goes to Egypt, he's in prison, he's enslaved, he works for many people, and while in prison, the Pharaoh has a terrifying dream. And he goes, I don't know what to do with this. I need someone to interpret this dream. And his cupbearer remembers the man that he was in prison with, who was very good at interpreting dreams. He goes, oh, there's this guy. Pharaoh calls upon him and he explains the dream to him. He goes, I had a dream and there were cows, and they were good and they were fat cows. And then other cows came along and they were not good cows, and they were very weak, and they ate the big ones. And Joseph, being given the gift by God to interpret these dreams, goes, oh, so Egypt's going to have quite a few years where we are well off. We're going to make a lot of food and we're going to thrive. And then coming is this period of fasting where we won't have much and we need to prepare for it. And the Pharaoh hears this and he goes, okay, I'm freaked out by the dream. You seem to know what it means. We'll do that. Joseph is elevated above where he was, and they grow food, they store it, they ration it, they survive the famine. Joseph's brothers in this time are without food. They go to Egypt. They don't recognize their brother that they sold into slavery. He helps them out. They realize, and everything is well and good. And they are well loved in that space. Joseph and his brothers become what we know as the tribes of Israel. They all go through a name change, just like Abram turns into Abraham and Paul turns into Saul. Their names change, and we now know them by other names. And so they dwell with the people of Egypt, and they thrive in this place. But enough generations pass that the Pharaoh that is then alive, when we get to Exodus, does not know Joseph, does not remember what him and his family and his people did for them to help them survive. And instead he looks around him and he goes, there are so many people here that aren't my people fully. They don't worship the same God. They don't do the same things that we do, and that terrifies me. What happens if they revolt against us? What happens if they try and overthrow us? There are so many of them that they just might win. I'm going to enslave them. And he does, and it's awful. He puts them through so much. They build pyramids and houses and are treated terribly. And God's people live like that for many, many years. And that's where we get to the Exodus and the Passover. God's people are mourning. Pharaoh sends out a decree to kill all of the young males of the time to stop them from being able to become a bigger population. And we get the story of Moses, which I, as a kid, could not fathom how someone could send a baby down a river in a basket without it sinking. Since becoming an adult, I now understand, buoyancy and water tightness and how that could have happened. But nevertheless, it happens to Moses, and he gets sent down the river, and he falls into the hands of one of the people in Pharaoh's care. And he gets raised as someone who is in line for the Egyptian throne. This person that comes from Israel's line is raised in that place and is put into God's plan of redeeming his people who are enslaved, entrapped, and are down. Moses realizes at some point, and if you've seen Prince of Egypt, the scene is epic, where he realizes that he actually is not someone who should have grown up with Pharaoh, and all of his people, all of his family, his brothers and sisters, are the people being hugely mistreated. And he flees. He runs away, he can't take it, and he flees into the desert where he's found by a group of people. And this is where he meets God. He meets God in a burning bush. And I have to assume that this was utterly terrifying, to have not only come upon a bush burning in the desert, but then for it to start talking to you. I genuinely can't imagine how that would have gone. And they put this plan in to go and redeem God's people. And Moses puts up a little bit of a fight. He's like, hey, I am not a good public speaker. I cannot go before Pharaoh, the person that I know and demand this of him, I do not have the ability. And God kind of shouts him down on that one and goes, am I not God? Am I not the great I am? Am I not the God of your people? But for your sake, I will also send you with your brother, and you guys can go together. And so they appear before Pharaoh, and they go, hey, God says, let his people go. Let them be free. This is not okay. Let them go. And Pharaoh goes, not happening. We have a lot of free labor, and we really enjoy that, not letting them go. And here we get the plagues of Egypt. How do I explain this? When I was about 17, I went on a mission trip. Some of you know this, some of you don't. But part of this mission trip, we do training for almost 2 weeks before we go anywhere in the world to do, help people so that we know what we're doing. We pour concrete slabs, we learn how to lay bricks properly, we learn how to make A-frames, many, many, many other things. But one of the things that you do each morning is you wake up bright and early at like 5 a.m. and you have to be ready to go. And then you all walk to the obstacle course, and you must complete the obstacle course with your team first thing in the morning. I personally really enjoyed this. It was so much fun. You start first day, and you're just like, I have no idea what's going on. I've walked through these obstacles once because they've explained it to us, and now we're about to have to try and do this in the fastest time possible, and I just don't see how that's happening. I had a great time. Many people did not. But all of this obstacle course helps you work together as a team. It bonds you in a way. But the other thing that they've done in this obstacle course is that all of it represents part of the Bible. And so you run in, and one of the first things that you have to do is there are a bunch of concrete bricks. So you're learning how to handle concrete properly. But they all have different books of the Bible written on them, and you have to order them in your team. And as the weeks go on, what they start doing, the person in charge of that obstacle stands there, and they look at your group, and they realize who knows the books of the Bible, and then you're not allowed to talk anymore. And then everyone else has to try and figure out where the books went because you were the one telling them and they don't know. And you learn the books of the Bible pretty quick when you have to move a lot of blocks of concrete. My personal favorite way that they made us do it was they made us do it without communicating, backwards, and only every third book. And when you're trying to beat your personal best time of the obstacle course that you have to run, it's very frustrating, but you learn quick. But one of the obstacles is the plagues of Egypt. You don't actually have to experience them. They're not going to cover you in blood or anything, because that would be wild. But after you have, moved all the concrete blocks and climbed up and down a Jacob's ladder, which is a rope ladder that is a lovely tall A-frame that is about the height of that door, and you've run down and through. They have the eye of the needle, which is just a tire, but everyone has to get through the tire as fast as possible. So you get pretty creative and very good at aiming your jump through that bad boy. And then we get to the pile of tires. And that's considered Mount Sinai, and you have to run a lap around it, and then you have to climb over the pile of tires. I don't know if you've ever done that before. Tires are hard to climb, mostly because in the morning dew they're very slippery, but also because they have holes in so many bits you can catch your feet on. And once you complete this, you then have to go through, the tires are now on the ground, and you have to put one foot in each to run through them. But you have to say the plagues of Egypt as you do it, in the right order. And there's a lovely little sign there that does tell you. And the first day, you're like, yeah, this is fine. I just read the sign and I jump through. And then, day 2, I just read the sign and I jump through. Day 3, the sign has moved further back. And so halfway through the tires, you can't see the sign anymore. You could only see it at the start, and so you got to remember. And if you don't remember, back to the start of the tires you go. My point is, these things are drilled into us when we trained for team, in the same way that the words of institution are probably drained into you because you hear them so many times. These plagues that the people went through are big and terrifying, but they have a way of remembering them during the Passover. Because in each one of them, it was God saying to his people, I am going to get you out of this. And despite Pharaoh holding his ground and being like, no, don't, we're still going to get through this. And so we get to, and I'm just going to walk over here for a second. Geordie, it's okay. I'm coming back. We get to the instruction of the Passover. So we have the plague of blood, where they turn all of the water into blood and it's not drinkable. They got flies that are everywhere, and then they've got lice that are everywhere. There's hail falling from the sky. People have boils that really hurt that they can't seem to get rid of. Their livestock are dying. And the final plague, Moses and Aaron appear before Pharaoh and they go, you need to let God's people go. He is going to kill the firstborn of everything that is in Egypt. This is really significant. The firstborn was important, not only for, parents and their children, but for worship and sacrifice. The firstborn lamb being the thing that was slain is huge to them. And Pharaoh decides not to let them go. And so God gives this instruction to Moses, and I'm going to read it to you. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this month shall be the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell all of the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, every man shall take a lamb according to their father's house, a lamb per household. And if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his nearest neighbor shall take according to the number of people. Take according to what each can eat, and you shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish. You can take it from sheep or goat. You shall keep it until the 14th day of the month. And when the whole congregation is in assembly, Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight. They shall take some of the blood and put it on 2 of the doorposts and the lintel of the house where they eat it. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled in water, but roasted with its head, legs, and inner parts. You shall let none of it remain until morning. If anything remains until morning, you shall burn it. In this manner you will eat it with your belt fastened, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You will eat it in haste. This is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all of the firstborn in the land, both man and beast. And on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague will befall or destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. As a statute forever, you will keep it as a feast. God gives them some very, very, very specific instructions. This is the thing that you're going to do, and I will see it as a sign, and I will recognize you as my people. And when I fall upon the entire space of Egypt to take the firstborn of everything, I will see you as my people, and I will leave you be. Because you hear me, and you're listening to me, and you trust me, and I'm going to save you from this. And that's exactly what happens. There's some very specific ways in which they do it. But on the 14th night, God descends on Egypt. He takes the firstborn animal, the firstborn son, the firstborn everything. And it's gone. It's dead. And you can imagine how much sorrow was in the land in the morning when they realized, all of the Egyptians that knew that this was coming, that they had gone, nah, that's not going to happen, when it had actually happened. And that's where Pharaoh lets them go. He goes, Okay, you can leave. I don't want you here. This sign is so huge that it continues as a ritual, as a feast, as part of the culture. And so, I'm going to give you a very brief rundown of what that looks like. If none of you have ever been involved in the Seder meal before, this is the way that it happens. It's, as someone who's done it the last few years at youth, I can say with my whole heart that the food, not that enjoyable. It's not a great time. But it serves a very good purpose. That's no shade to Joel or anyone else that prepares it. It's just not great. The first thing that happens at this meal is that they set the table. They put the plate there, and then they put some things in very specific locations. They put a shank of lamb at the top. Then they've got charoset, which is a salad that's like apple and cinnamon and nuts and wine and is the best part of the meal, I promise you. Because the next thing is they get a bitter herb, either celery or parsley or sometimes potato, and they make sure that it's bitter. It's like vinegar or salt, and it's not a great time. And then you get, vegetables, and then you get an egg, just a hard-boiled egg, and that's the plate. And in the center of the table, they have matzah, which is unleavened bread, and they put that in the center of the table, and that's there throughout the whole meal. They also put a bowl of salt water in the middle for you to, dip your bitter herbs in to make it worse. Everyone gets a wine glass, because over the meal there are 4 glasses drunk at very specific times with very specific meanings. And then they also set an extra glass for the prophet Elijah, because they believe that he will come before the Messiah. And this is something that happens in years to come. And they set that there, and he has a place at their table. And that's the setup alone. And I did write them down, there are 15 steps in the Passover meal, because it's actually more of a service, is the thing that happens. And I will say it to you fast. So, they've set the table, they light the candles, and then the service begins. They begin by holding the first cup of wine in their right hand, and they say some liturgy and they say a blessing. And they drink the first cup with, "Blessed are you, Lord, our God, King of the universe, who has kept us in life, sanctified us, and enabled us to reach this season." That's how that starts. The "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe," starts every blessing in this. So I'm not going to repeat it over and over, but it is there in all of them. They drink the first cup of wine, and then they go and wash their hands in a very specific way. The next thing that then happens is that they take the vegetable off their plate and they dip it into the salt water in the middle, and then they eat it. And this is, to represent sweat and tears and the slavery and the hardships that they were going through. And they say a blessing for thanking God for creating the fruit of the earth. And then they take the middle unleavened bread and they break it in half. And they put half of it back and they wrap the other half in a napkin or a cloth and they put it somewhere else. Some people hide it in here, they don't, but it's removed. And this is saved for later. This is dessert. That half piece of unleavened bread is dessert and the rest of it goes back. And then they start telling the story of the Passover, which is what I've just told you. But during the telling, it's a bit more detailed, but they have 4 very specific roles that are played by often the youngest people there, and they've got 4 questions that are important. It's, what are the laws that God commanded us? And that allows the adults that are there to start the discussion of, well, these are the laws that God gave us. And then they have the wicked child, and that is how it is written. It says, but what does Passover mean to you? And what I thought the response was really interesting in the handbook that I was reading was it says, and parents should respond like this: "It is because of what God did for me when we came out of Egypt. No, not me, or you, but what he did for us. And with your attitude, you wouldn't have been redeemed." And I read that and I was like, pardon me? Bit wild to have in this commemorative service. The simple child, which is a very kind way of saying dumb, is, what does the Seder meal represent? And they, talk about commemorating all of the things that happened in the Passover. And the final one is a child that just doesn't say anything, and this is to start the discussion of why commemoration happens, why it's important to remember these things, and how they continue to affect them in the future. The next thing that they do, their wine glass has been filled, they're on their second glass of wine now, and they take a drop out for every plague of Egypt. So they repeat them, they chant them in order. They go blood, frogs, gnats, flies, livestock, boils, hail, locust, darkness, firstborn. And they take a drop of wine out for each of these to remember the plagues. And then they sing a song together, which I think was really nifty. And the song follows the pattern of, if God would have just done this and not this thing, that would have been enough for us. And it's the way of repeating and remembering God's blessing to them. It's, if God had taken us out of Egypt, but not executed judgment on the Egyptians, that would have been enough. But he did execute judgment, and if he had just done that, it would have been enough. But he actually did it to their idols as well, and that would have been enough. But then he also killed the firstborns of everything, and that would have been enough. But he also gave us their wealth, and that would have been enough. But then he split the sea for us, and that would have been enough. But then he led us through the sea on dry land, and that would have been enough. But then he drowned our enemies in the water so they couldn't follow us, and that would have been enough. And then he provided for us for 40 years in the desert, and that would have been enough too. What a cool way of remembering not only God's blessings, but here's like what would have been enough, and here's where it keeps going. It keeps building, and it keeps building, and it keeps building. And then they explain the symbols of the Passover meal so that when they eat it very shortly, they all know what it means. The lambs representing God passing over and, sparing them. The unleavened bread is because they didn't have enough time to let the dough rise, so they had to make bread that didn't rise. And the bitter herbs are the pain and the suffering of slavery. They all respond to this by praising with the words of Psalm 114, which is just thanking God for the Exodus and the things that he did. And then they drink the second cup of wine. And then they wash their hands a second time. And they thank God for his laws and commanding them to be clean. They then bless the meal. They then start by eating, then they bless the unleavened bread. They eat some of it. They bless the bitter herbs. They eat some of it. And then they make a sandwich with the really nice salad and the bread. And then Passover dinner is served and they eat together and they share that time. And then it's dessert time and they have the piece of bread that they saved from before that they hid called the afkomen, and they break it and they share it among them. They then conclude with grace. And they bless the third cup of wine and they drink it. They welcome Elijah and then they praise and bless. They praise and say blessings. They drink the fourth cup of wine, and then at the end, they end with a prayer asking God for the Messiah to come. And I know that that's a lot to take in. And I know that I've been talking for a while, but we're almost there. One of the really cool things about this, the reason that I've just explained all of it to you and the significance and the fact that these people were doing it for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, is because of how it actually still affects us today. They have 4 cups of wine during the Passover, and some of you might be really excited about that, and some of you might go, I just really don't want to drink that much wine because wine is weird and it tastes kind of strange. That's where I fall. You are allowed grape juice, but the reason that it's 4 cups and not anything else is because of a covenant that God made with them. He said, therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will deliver you from slavery. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and I will make you my people. There's one cup to remember each of those promises. That I will bring you out, I will deliver you, I will redeem you, and I will make you my people. And the reason that that is so significant and important is when we get to Holy Week, the disciples turn to Jesus and go, where are we meant to be celebrating the Passover? This Passover is 7 days of celebration, one for all of the days of creation, and for the days that they were pursued out of Egypt. And they find a place and they recline together, and then we get to the Lord's Prayer. No, not the Lord's Prayer, my bad. The Last Supper, and we get to the First Communion, where Jesus has broken the bread and passed it around to them and demonstrated that this is my body broken for you. We then get to the third cup, in which Jesus says to them, drink of this is my blood. It is the new covenant poured out for you. This cup is the part of the promise that is the redemption cup. This is Jesus showing them that that's about to be fulfilled. It wasn't the first cup of the meal. It wasn't the last cup of the meal. It was very specifically the third one. And that's highlighted through quite a few sections of the New Testament. That all of this, God's redemption plan from the beginning, them in Egypt, leading them out, and this meal that is so ingrained in them to know that this cup is for redemption, is where Jesus stands and goes, this is the covenant for you. Remember this as often as you drink it. There are so many incredible things that we can learn by looking at the Old Testament that make our Holy Week so much more significant, so much more powerful, hard-hitting, as it were. That bit that I read at the start about the Passover and the instructions about the lamb itself, I'm going to read to you, I'm going to read to you how it transfers across. They had to find a lamb of the right size for their household. And if they couldn't, they gathered their neighbors together until they had enough people. And we have Jesus as our lamb, and we are all gathered together. We grab our nearest neighbor because there is simply too much for us to take on our own, for us to share in. We grab the people closest to us and we get them to share in it too, because that's the instruction. The lamb of the right size, without blemish. And then all of the assembly, the congregation of Israel, together kill the lambs at twilight. In a couple weeks, you will hear of, Jesus' path to the cross and when he dies. Something that I found very interesting while rereading over this, that they will all together kill the lamb at twilight after they have decided which one it is. In Holy Week, we watch the Jewish people turn against Jesus. We watch them, he goes before them at Pontius Pilate, and they pick him. They choose their lamb. They choose who is being sacrificed. They pick together. And then he's executed. And they had an uncommonly dark day that day. Twilight is described as this time between the sun disappearing and the sun reappearing. And Jesus is hung on the cross. The sky darkens. And he passes with the sun not present. It sounds a lot like to me that the whole congregation of Israel joined together, picked their lamb, stood there at twilight, and killed it, echoing this Passover unintentionally. It was described that this lamb was to remain whole, not to be cooked, cut apart, but to remain whole and to be utilized. With this blood I will pass over you. A final piece of history for you for today, that in Leviticus, we love it, every sacrifice has a very specific use. Blood is something that covers over the smell. Blood is our life force, and it's described in Leviticus 17:11 that blood of life forfeit is the atonement for your sins. It has to be blood, and it has to be of something good trading place for the bad thing. And by Jesus' blood, he sees everyone and he passes over. God loves us. And by looking to the Old Testament and all of this that is ingrained in, that we don't actually even think about too much anymore, we can see how significant Jesus' death on the cross is, the way that it happened, and the reason that it happened the way that it is was to show that every step of this was God's redemptive plan. And so as we head into Holy Week next week, when you hear Passover, when you hear the intricacies, when you hear about the cup and the body and the blood and the dying on the cross, I hope that you are able to look back and remember this promise from God to not only take his people out, but his plan to save them in that moment, the instruction to treat it this way, to cover the house in blood, and to remain safe, and he will pass over them. That when there is too much to be shared, we are to find our neighbor and to share it with them as well. To remember the love that is there for every step of this plan to be followed through in a way that we wouldn't have recognized otherwise. We're going to end in a prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you have always had a plan for us. You love us so deeply that not only did you send your Son to die for our sins, to be this blemishless lamb that we chose, that we put on the cross, that we sent to die for us, but that at the very beginning, when we started going astray, when we felt trapped, when we needed to be freed from the transgressions that we were feeling at the time and the oppression of the world then, that you set this thing in motion, that you laid it all out before us and made the people remember it, Lord. We thank you that your love is so deep that it spans all of the generations, and for it to come through in such a big moment as this. We thank you for your love, for Jesus' death on the cross. We thank you that we are able to remember this time and all that it has for us. Amen.